Hi, everybody. Thanks so very much for coming. I know it took a huge effort to take this Friday on your last day of class. I can't tell you how grateful I am for your turnout, for our guest Jelena Gledek and Svi from Mesalk, and Emily and Yitna from Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and Yitna from ITS. And we have Gail Hunger from SCPS and Tricia Gordon from Collab. So we want to thank these guys for taking time at the end of the semester to join us, and the rest of you. Thank you so much. We ordered food for 30, and I'm so glad we did. So welcome to our high tea, and I'm going to turn it over to my friend Jelena Gledek at this point.
Thank you, Valerie. Thank you so much, and I'd also like to thank you all for coming very much. I know you're at the end of a busy semester, so I hope that this tea and workshop invigorates you and relaxes you at the same time, and we'll suppose that that's possible. This workshop is organized by the ASCIT and the IWL, and the format is based on several formats for organization and for work that I've used before. You might recognize some of them, but the main goal is that each of us, including me, leaves today with the feeling that you've either learned something or somehow contributed, so that you spend this time well. So I'd like you all to leave with that idea. So in that spirit, if at any point during this hour and a half you want to make a question, make a comment, get up, freshen up your drink, stretch, rearrange the tables, you should really feel free to do so, of course in a not very disruptive manner. But really feel free to relax, and please, I'd really like you to utilize this hour and a half in the best possible way. I think we have a very diverse crowd, but I hope that after this we will know more about language portfolios, we will be even more excited about using them, or at least you will find something in this that will be useful for you in your own line of work, whether you're teaching or whether you're in administration. So, in the announcement, we said that this is a preview of the future of language learning. And it's a preview because I think there's no denying that in the 21st century, language learning is changing, and everything is changing. The way private schools are teaching languages is changing. The way tutoring is taking place is changing. If you remember, when we were all younger, it was really difficult to find a language partner, especially if you were learning some less commonly taught language. Nowadays, it's really not that difficult. You can use Skype, and you can find a language partner anywhere in the world. It's very, very easy and accessible. And language MOOCs, it's currently a hotly debated topic. In my personal view, I think we might really have good language MOOCs in a couple of years. Right now, maybe they're not as good, but they are the future in a way. And of course, higher education has to adapt to that in some way. And we have to keep our language programs relevant and competitive in this new environment. And we have to know that we're offering our students something that has value and that has relevance in this 21st century with all these options that are available to them. And to do that, of course, our language programs have to be comprehensive in some way, and they have to acknowledge all the changes that are happening in technology and in language education and learning. Now, why are we talking about portfolios today? So as you know, my name is Jelena Gledek, and I am coming here from the University of Belgrade in Serbia, spending the semester here at UVA. And I was lucky to work for the past 4 years as project associate at a Tempus Refless project. So it's an EU-funded project, the Tempus project family. It's a strand of European Commission-funded projects. The name of the project is Refless, and this is the website. And of course, the papers in the center are there for your notes, so feel free to grab a paper and a pen. The Post-its you will need later on for our exercise, but the papers you're free to use. There's more up front if you need them. And this presentation will, of course, be available for you as well. But if you would like to check out more about our project, this is our website. And one of the goals of the project was to harmonize language learning. Now, reform, because Refless is reforming foreign language studies in Serbia, and the project included all the state universities in Serbia. Reform is kind of a difficult word in higher education, so harmonizing is a much nicer word. But it does have a different meaning as well. So the meaning is that you should look at what is actually going on and kind of try to align these things rather than burn everything and start from scratch. So our idea was to do that, to see what was going on in language learning, and then to kind of try to harmonize that within Serbia and then within potentially the European Union, because the hot topic in the EU is mobility, having students spend one semester at one university and then a semester at another university. So what we needed for this process of harmonization was basically a common means of communication. And portfolios came here as a very good tool, which provided a tangible point of reference for all the stakeholders. And when we started really digging deep, we saw that there are many stakeholders in the process of language learning. There's, of course, the obvious ones, the student and the teacher, but there are also the future employers. And portfolios are very good because they kind of give students a kickstart in creating their resumes. And especially in Europe, the language skills part of your resume is very important because it's very, very good to be plurilingual in Europe nowadays. It's kind of a common fact nowadays that if you want to work in any company that is in many European countries, you need to know at least 3 languages. So there are employers, there are accrediting bodies, of course, who are maybe not that quick in changing their standards in line with what's happening. So there are many stakeholders in this process, not to mention the parents who are often paying for this education and they want to know that this education is also relevant. So there are a lot of stakeholders and the reforms were implemented with the help of portfolios and they are successful so far. So we're in our 4th year and we're doing pretty good, I think. And what is very good about portfolios is that if you can go through all the different standards and all the requirements, that portfolios can be used for complete assessment. Now, I don't know how much you've used portfolios and how much you know about them. In case, I hope you all agree with this statement. In case you agree, then you will use these benefits and resources to convince other people. But then if you disagree, you can use them to try and convince yourself. So some of the obvious benefits of portfolios are that they are tangible records of language learning. So the same way that you can keep tests, you can keep these portfolios, and they're very tangible. You can actually see what people can do with language. They help learners recognize the many learning opportunities available to them. They might not realize all the times they're actually learning languages. If they're on the fan page of their favorite Japanese band and talking with other fans, they're actually learning the language. They might not be aware of that, and they might not be aware that that's something that teachers might take into account in the process of assessment. So portfolios are also good for that. They personalize the process, and they allow the teachers to actually see what that specific student needs help with in the process of language learning. And they help organize work, facilitate recognizing strengths and weaknesses, which is good also outside the language learning classroom as well. Facilitate review and ease progress monitoring and presentation. And I have gathered here some resources that you will have available to look about portfolio assessment. And I would like to point out especially this one here, which has a wealth of information on generally assessment and independent language learning, and it's from the University of Southampton. And I know you're also, some of you are familiar with their work, and they were our partner in this project, and they're doing interesting work related to independent language learning. And I don't know if you've heard of Professor David Little. He's currently at the Trinity College in Dublin, and he was a very important player in the development and the implementation of the European language portfolio in Europe. And if you haven't heard of the European language portfolio, I will tell you all about it in a minute. So, of course, at the start of every talk about portfolios, we have to beg the question, what are portfolios? And it might seem like a redundant question, but the same way when we started harmonizing our language programs, we realized we're not really speaking the same language. We're talking about learning outcomes, we're talking about curriculum, we're not necessarily talking about the same thing. So we have to know what are portfolios. And I would say that there's no one right answer here, of course. So a portfolio can be anything that collects evidence on a certain progress. So we can say that. And then, why, of course, in an institution, you will want to have portfolios that follow certain standards and guidelines, but we'll come back to that later. They can have different formats. They can be folders. They used to be paper folders. If you learned languages a long time ago, the biggest problem, we talked about that before the start of this workshop, was where to store these large paper folders with all these certificates and all sorts of other pieces of evidence about your language learning. They can be simple diaries, and nowadays they can be web pages. They're usually blogs and other different forms, and anything is basically acceptable if you know what you want from them. And then there can be multiple uses. You can have portfolios for the process of learning. You can have teaching portfolios, and I believe we'll hear a bit about that today as well. And so portfolios can basically monitor any type of progress. And a portfolio sometimes is just a portfolio of a company, which tells you about this company's business, etc. And this, of course, you know. And so although these different types are distinct in theory, they do tend to overlap in practice. And this is from a book on using portfolios in the classroom, where they talk about portfolios in teaching and why it is sometimes difficult to differentiate very clearly what type of portfolio you're going to use. So what I think is a better way of approaching things is actually seeing what you want to achieve, and actually deciding to tie together what is already happening in the learning process. And so every learning process is different, naturally. So you need to see what you're doing actually in the classroom and what your students are doing and kind of work on those strengths. Because portfolios should not be an additional burden, and it should not use more of your time and more of your space, because then that's defeating the point. And that's what often happens with new technology, with new things to do. They become a burden, and of course, after some time, people don't want to use them anymore because just one more thing to do, especially students don't like that if it's something totally detached from their everyday lives. So we have to make them fun. We have to put colorful papers and nice food and flowers and nice music. So we need to do that. We need to do that for everything, make things fun. Make learning fun. So that's what I think we need to think about when we think about how we can implement portfolios in the learning process. Replacing classical assessment with portfolios is one good way. Unfortunately, when you tell students, okay, you won't have a test, that's good enough for them, they'll do it for credit. But also we can make this meaningful. We can make them more excited about learning. So that's one good way of approaching things, not thinking that specifically like which type and which software, but what do we want to do with this. And when it comes to language portfolios specifically, of course, as you know, they're supposed to motivate the learners and they're supposed to provide a record at the same time. And then there's the big question of whether you should record formal and informal education, because a lot of language learning happens outside the classroom. So do you want to acknowledge that or not? You have the question of prior learning, and language portfolios have been very useful for that question. I know here I was at the Chinese language class the other day. There are a lot of people here who speak Chinese at home, but they don't read or write. They can just speak it very well, understand it. So there's this question of recognizing prior learning. Language portfolios include self-assessment checklists, and these can be very useful to assess students' prior learning. And they can be used both inside and outside the classroom and curriculum. So one of the first strictly formulated language portfolios was the European Language Portfolio, and it was designed in the 1990s and the 2000s. And of course, multilingualism and multiculturalism is a very big question in Europe. So they really needed a good tool which would help them make this language education as efficient as possible. And the basic principles is that it is the property of the learner. It is based on the common European framework of reference for languages, which is similar to what you have with ACTFL. And I will make that comparison in a minute as well. And it has common principles and guidelines, and the main word here is comparability. So it has to be comparable, because that's the idea with the mobility and the different institutions, accrediting programs you have attended at another institution. You have some resources here on the European Language Portfolio. And this is the one that I'm kind of proud of, because we developed that as part of our project, and it's specifically adapted for foreign language studies in higher education. It's bilingual in Serbian and English, so you can check it out at our website. The basic European language portfolio is offered on the European Commission website, and you can adapt it for any need you might have. So it's for all languages. I mean, I don't want to go too much into that, because I suppose you've at least, how many of you have heard of language portfolios in general? Well, good enough. Okay, so, well, you know then that basically you have these open source documents that you can adapt, but most of them have these three main parts. They have the passport, the language biography, and the dossier. And the same or similar goes for LinguaFolio. LinguaFolio is the US version, which was inspired sort of by the ELP, if we're allowed to say that, or let's say improved the European language portfolio. And so when we talk about these different standards that they're based on, we're basically talking about the same thing. We're talking about the process of language learning. We just need to realize we are talking about the same thing. And we'll go to the board in a couple of minutes, and as you'll see, I've put some levels here, and we have beginner, novice, A1, A2, intermediate, B1, B2, advanced, C1, C2. You know what these are. These are basically levels of proficiency. And it doesn't matter that much where you'll draw the line. It does for practical purposes when it comes to assessment, but we're all talking about the same thing, basically. And these are just different ways of talking about it. So in the ACTFL, you have novice and intermediate and advanced, while in the CEFR, you have A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. In any case, this structure of the portfolio is something that has been agreed upon to kind of make things organized so we all follow the same line so they're comparable in some fashion. The passport usually contains factual information about the language learner and the history of language learning, and there you would put your different certificates and where you learned this language. Sometimes when you have portfolios in elementary schools, you will have, I don't know, movie tickets when you went to see a foreign movie or something like that. Then you have the language biography. This is the personal history, and there you have the self-assessment materials, where you usually have checklists, which are in the form of can-do statements, and these can be very helpful in terms of learning outcomes and accreditation standards. And then finally, you have the dossier, which used to be the thickest part of the folder, and now it can basically be anything. It can be hyperlinks to all kinds of different things that you can do with languages. And I just did something wrong, and now I've made it better. Okay. These portfolios are all built on standards. And these standards are, in the case of the European language portfolio, the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, and in the case of LinguaFolio, the ACTFL Proficiency Guidelines, performance descriptors, and progress indicators. And all these you have on their websites. The proficiency guidelines and performance descriptors talk more about skills, while the progress indicators tell you how this can help you in your assessment. And the wealth of this whole idea and what we're kind of scratching upon today, and what I hope that will be recognized and is being recognized, and there are a lot of initiatives to tie these things together, and that's why we have the optimistic recycling sign, is the fact that we're doing a lot of different things separately which can nicely be tied together, which is the levels of language proficiency, which we talk about in the real world, outside of academia. When you apply for a job, someone asks you, okay, are you fluent? Are you proficient? Even at a cafe when you talk to someone. We have the stages of language learning, which are always stages of language learning. So whether you start as a baby when you don't even know it, or as an adult, you have these different stages, and you have to go through them. There are no shortcuts, unfortunately, yet. And then, of course, you have the semestral curriculums and assessments, which happen in higher education, usually in semesters, sometimes a full year, but you have these nicely divided steps. And then you have these course learning outcomes, and they all talk about the same thing. Unfortunately, they're not often designed, developed, written at the same time, so they sometimes tend to be out of line, and they make our life very difficult. But actually, this can all be used to tie things in and kind of look at what we're actually doing and describe it in a nice, comparable fashion that can be harmonized if we want to harmonize. And I did it again. Okay. And here you have some resources on language portfolio use as well, which I hope you might find useful. A lot of them are European, some are also from the United States, some interesting examples. And then we come to e-portfolios, which are not that much different. Of course, they're portfolios, they're just in what? Electronic form, right? So they can take different types. We have standalone software, and of course, this was usually something that was designed in the 1990s when internet was not that popular. Maybe people didn't believe in it or didn't want to wait for it. So they designed these e-portfolios, and you have here two examples. One was designed as part of an EU project, and you can still download it. It's free. You register on the website. You have a Mac and Windows version. It's an English interface. Looks something like this. Looks familiar, maybe, like the software we used to use a long, long time ago. And here you put in your language and which languages. And can you imagine giving this to a young person today and telling them to use this? Seriously, with the apps and everything today, I mean, just visually, it would not be appealing to them. And just visually, they would not feel like this is something they're doing for fun or for them or that's useful at all in the real world. So yeah, you do have to think about that. And then you have the first Council of Europe accredited ELP, which maybe the design is a bit nicer, but it's pretty much the same thing. It basically looks like something, and we have to think about these things. We don't have to, but it would be good to think about these things. It has to be, it should be interesting to the students. So it should be something that's appealing to them. This looks like something like some complicated software that they need to key in the number of orders or whatever. So we have these standalone softwares. And just the idea of having them update them every week on their desktop computers are maybe something that's not that practical, and which seems like something that's adding rather than improving the process of language learning. We have today a lot of different plugins for LMSs or CLEs, and we have plugins for Moodle. Sorry, my institution uses Moodle, so that's why I gave this example. And there's and it looks something like this. So they use the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages nomenclature. And then we have the a Blackboard extension, and we have different sorts of web applications that can be adapted for these different sorts of learning management systems. And these are pretty good if an institution already uses some sort of software. These can be nicely tied in and integrated. There are online tools being developed right now, and that's something that also has commercial potential, similar to apps. We have the LinguaFolio Online, which was developed by the University of Oregon Center for Applied Second Language Studies. It was free while it was piloted, and now they charge $2 per student, which sounds very reasonable, and it is, but imagine how many students can use these. So that it's a space for profit. It's unfortunately something else we should, not have to, but should think about. So there's that as well. So you can develop a web application, and this is what their LinguaFolio looks like. The design is closer to 2014, if you agree. So it looks more like some app you would use on a daily basis. And of course, there's the option, which is in my personal view the best, which is to combine different tools. So to basically use the skills and resources which are already at the learner's disposal. And I focus here on the learner because, well, teachers, they learn all their lives as well. So it's good to learn from your students, to know what's the new hot app that can be used for language learning as well. So I think it's very good to do that, basically. And I will tell you about the steps that I suggest for deploying language portfolios in your teaching, but it's basically this, the idea of what they're using and how we can use what they're already doing to assess their learning and to help them learn even better. And something that you should be careful about here, of course, is that a portfolio without standards, goals, and reflection is just a multimedia presentation, a fancy electronic resume, or a digital scrapbook, which is here a quote from Dr. Helen Barrett, which is kind of true. And that's, I think, a lot of the aversion that I've heard from teachers who do not want that much technology and innovation in their teaching is that, basically the fear that we will lose the essence of learning and that we'll lose any control over it. But if we have good standards, it's not a fear that's maybe too realistic. But what are the questions that are usually asked? So what should be placed in the portfolio? So do you put in the movie ticket, or do you put in a photo of your friends at a beach in Argentina because they're the people who you spoke with that day? I mean, does that go into the portfolio? How often should items be added? Should you discipline your students to do that every week? Or should you tell them when something important happens, you should record it, and that way help them self-monitor what is important for their language learning? Who decides what goes into the portfolio? A lot of the changes that are happening in teaching are meant to empower the student and to make him participate even more in the learning process. So who decides? Should it just be the teacher, or should it be negotiated? Who should be given responsibility for its safekeeping? For the paper portfolios, storage was one big issue, but we discussed this as well before this workshop. For e-portfolios, privacy is a very important issue now, and there's been a lot of this talk, who monitors which information that we send out electronically. If we allow them to incorporate all these different sources, are there any maybe private pieces of information that might be at risk? What should be done with the portfolios at the end of the course? Should they be stored at the institution? Are they the property of the learner? Should they be deleted? Should they become a part of their potential business portfolio one day? So these are all questions that need to be addressed. What is certain is that portfolios should adequately represent the student's performance in any format we choose. They should be in a structure that clearly shows which standards are being met. And that's something that's being forgotten. So everyone, the student and the teacher, they need to be aware which standards are being met by this specific activity that you're showing in your portfolio. They should include reflective commentary, but this reflective commentary should not be too overwhelming. It should be like those little arrows in Excel that you can hover over and then you see the comment. So you should be able to see the table, but it shouldn't overwhelm it. And they should be a combination of formative and summative qualities. And since I'm a China scholar, I'm always for harmony, and that's how we started. So we shouldn't choose one or the other. We should try and have both, and the best of both worlds. So it should both focus on the process and on the goal. And this has its benefits. So the benefits for the student, for the process, are that they can learn their own pace, they can reflect, and they can review very easily. And for the goal, they can plan their pace, they can compare, they can know where they are right now. If they know that by the end of the term they're supposed to be here and now I'm here, okay, then I know how much effort I need to invest now. For the teacher, it can help them adapt the pace because maybe you're going too fast. If most of your students are not getting there, maybe you should slow down. If for one unit you're taking a lot longer, maybe you should change your curriculum in the next term. And it can help you give personal advice, it can ease assessment, and you can align it with your accreditation standards and learning outcomes, which is maybe one of, in my view, the biggest benefits when it comes to administering courses. And of course, for the employer, it can, and this is something that I've stolen a bit from Zvi, because when we first met, he talked about how his students can actually show their future employer, look, I can get from here to here in this much time. And that's really amazing. I mean, you can actually go to someone and tell them, okay, I learned Hebrew in a month to, I don't know, B1 level. And that's pretty fascinating. I think an employer would be fascinated. I'd be fascinated if someone came to me with that. And then you can actually show them tangible skills. Your employer is not always going to be, well, they'll probably rarely be language professionals. You can actually show them. I can interview someone in Mandarin and they understand me and I respond. I still get these reactions when I'm at a Chinese restaurant and I speak to someone and then someone next to me says, they understand you. Yes, they understand me. So it's very, very tangible and you can actually see what can be done. And now let's see what else can be done. It's time for the hands-on part. So now we will, right on time for the thunder. That's just the signal for the start of the exercise, don't worry. Special effect. So, okay. We're perfectly on time. So we will have around 10 minutes, and here's what we'll do. Okay, we will start the music, which is important to set the mood, especially when there's thunder. Okay, and we'll do this. We have here very roughly grouped, so this is not normative. We have roughly grouped language levels. And if you ever taught a language, learned a language, thought about language, you will be able to do this exercise. I'm sorry if you're feeling too lazy, but it is maybe time to move up a bit. It's been half an hour already. And so we have these very roughly marked levels. We have beginner, we have intermediate, and you have advanced. And advanced is considered to go up to superior, so it can go up to native speaker level. We have these different skills. They're also marked differently in different systems, but we have interpersonal, interpretive, and presentational. So the interpersonal would be spoken interaction, the interpretive would be listening and reading, and the presentational would be speaking and writing. Pretty easy. And then here, we will use the different colors of Post-its you have on your desks over there. So we'll use the blue for the tools. So how do we learn these things? How do we get here? You can use all the different tools. You can use these examples here to start with. You have YouTube, you have WordPress, SoundCloud, Facebook, Twitter, Prezi. You have all these different tools. So how? Which tool to use? Then we have content. What do you do with them? Do we film an interview? Do we put an audio of a speech on SoundCloud? Do we write an essay, a photo, a movie ticket? So we have the content. And then we have the unit. So this is more for the language teachers, because all this is nice, but teaching takes place within one semester, and you have different units, and even, which is one of the most oftenly asked questions at these sorts of workshops is, okay, but when do I teach the past perfect tense? Like, all of this is nice, but when do I do, I don't know, when do I do some case? So you can do that as well. Like, where does that fit in? Like, do you need the past perfect to talk about your family? Can you teach all of it or some of it? It's more about your approach to language learning. So you have here the unit, and we have some examples here: introducing yourself, expressing your goals, traveling. So where do those fit in? Like, at which level do you know how to do these things? So we'll use blue for tools. Like, which tools can you use for learning at which level? Can beginners use YouTube? Is there any sense in that? Or should they just take photos of traffic signs that they can read in China, for example? The content, so the what. When can you make a speech? Is it a speech if you can just say your name and hello? Maybe, maybe not. And then the unit. So I'd like you to use these different colors: blue for tools, green for content, and yellow for unit. Either my examples or your own ideas, and then post them here, which level they can be used on. Okay? Any questions? Okay. Okay, so now we're seeing what usually happens and why do teachers fear doing something creative. You'll never get the students to listen if you get them sticking things on the board. So I don't know if I can get my students to listen now. No? Okay.
Maybe the thunderstorm effect.
This be a production expediter. Can I help?
Y'all, yeah,
Turn on the
y'all.
light.
A couple of times, on and off.
Music.
Okay. Well, we did manage to, get back to our focus. Thank you. But as I said, some of you were not listening. Like, this is why teachers don't want to use creative things in their classroom, because you'll never get them to settle down afterwards. But as some of you have noted, my point exactly is that this is an exercise you can and should do with your students at the beginning of the process of introducing portfolios in your classroom. Now, we have fulfilled our goal. The goal was to make it look like, as you said so nicely, a patchwork. So it's supposed to be colorful. Because a lot of people say, okay, will we have enough to do? What will we do? Yeah, we have everything for everything. We have tools, we have content, we have units everywhere within the whole language learning process. And we'll take stills of these, and I will put them in some sort of form, and we'll send this out to you as well, because these are valuable ideas. So you'll have these as well. But the idea is basically to make this one step in the development of electronic portfolio usage. You need to define the aim. So fortunately or unfortunately, there you go. So fortunately or unfortunately, the aim is kind of already set within your curriculum, within your learning goals and outcomes, within the accreditation standards. So you already have the aim to work off. And then you can do this sort of exercise with your students to get to know what type of technology is available to them and to which extent they use it. They will be the best ones to know and tell you what can be included in the portfolio. And they will probably love this. Just throw some Post-its and colorful pens and do this. Every classroom has a board, so it's not that hard. And it doesn't last that long. This lasted 10 minutes. So you can really devote a short part of your class, and it's very good and very helpful, and it gets them very excited, and it helps you learn. I learn so much from my students, and I'm not even at that age when I can say I'm not in touch with the young people anymore, but I'm getting very fresh ideas from them, so that's perfect. So you can do that. Consent is one issue, and especially in the United States. Europe is still behind on that, but in the United States you have to be very careful about consent, and that's something that has to be negotiated with the institution where the portfolios are being implemented. You should explain the importance and benefits and define the audience, and it can also be part of an exercise like this. And then just empower the students. Including peer review is a very good thing, especially if you do it through encouraging critical thinking and reflective practices. So not criticism, but critical thinking. And it helps a lot. And it helps them, it doesn't keep them pampered and thinking they're perfect. It helps them be okay with failing. It's kind of an entrepreneurial spirit, I think. And then, of course, in the end, assess. More resources on that. And that pretty much wraps up what I had prepared. And now we'll have a very nice opportunity to listen to people from right here at UVA and what they've been doing with portfolios. And first of all, we have Zvi Gilboa from the Department of Middle Eastern and South Asian Languages and Cultures, and he will talk about modern Hebrew portfolios. So I give the floor to Zvi. And do you want me to help you?
Thank you so much, Yelena, and everyone. I mean, it's a wonderful opportunity. I'd like to begin with a few anecdotes from Bloomington, Indiana. The first anecdote dates to my first year of teaching modern Hebrew. And at the end of the year, I created a very, one could say, ambitious final exam for my students. And then the students took the final exam. And then I was sitting in my solitude and grading the final exams and find myself, okay, I mean, you have to be really fair. So you start pondering, okay, is this going to be a half a point or a quarter point or 1 point? And you spend hours and hours and hours, and it's the end of the semester, and you must finish grading the final exams and submit grades. And after all that process ended, I found myself thinking or asking myself, so what exactly have I been doing the last several hours, and how did that actually help my students? The second anecdote is from my first semester of teaching German, also at Indiana University. And that semester, I also took a pedagogy course, and the person who taught the course was also the course chair for teaching G100, the first semester of German. And then for the midterm and the final exam, we had to actually do everything together because it was standardized. So we had to sit together and do all the grading, and I think actually also for the quizzes. And also I remember these discussions about, so would this be half a point or a quarter point, and how do you treat that? And I must say, it was pretty traumatic. Again, that feeling that this really does not help the students, and also that it was pretty much pointless because it has no validity in actually predicting how good the students' German was, or how good is it going to be a year from now, 2 years from now, or 5 years from now. Third anecdote I owe to a fellow student from Japan who came to the US after spending a couple years in Germany. And I still remember her telling me that by the end of her stay in Germany, her German was good enough to call the cell phone company and yell at them so that they can reverse a false charge. So, so I think if we're speaking of portfolio and what to be advanced, I think, if any of our students happens to call a cell phone company and yell at them, they should record that, that phone call and put it in the portfolio. I think, and coming back to, how progress and what Yelena mentioned before, when we think of what type of school we'd like to have for our children or our students, probably we think not of a school that will teach them what to think, but how to think. And when I'm thinking of portfolios, I'm thinking of a portfolio that will show not as much as what the student had learned, but actually how the student learns. And that is something that we can see, again, if we look at the span of everything the student did in a semester, and then over 2 semesters, and 3 semesters, and 4 semesters. And when we talk about the 4 language skills, I must say that I sometimes think that we should, especially with respect to writing and reading, there are some, I don't want to call them old school, but some more traditional activities that we shouldn't give up on, and that these nevertheless can be incorporated into the digital portfolios we have, and that's something I would like to show. When we think of languages like Arabic, Chinese, Japanese, Hebrew, Tibetan, all the languages that use non-traditional alphabets, non-Western. Okay. Is this on tape?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. or delete it afterward. So all the languages that use non-Western alphabets or other scripts, basically using a pencil and paper and writing this is of the essence. I mean, if you don't have that skill, no matter how well you type in Chinese on the computer, if you cannot actually draw these ideograms, then you're missing something. Same with Hebrew. If you cannot actually write something in Hebrew very quickly or in Arabic, then you haven't really learned everything you were supposed to learn. So I think, as much as we talk about digital portfolios, I wouldn't say that typing is what you need to do. On the other hand, scanning is one other thing that you can do. And for the writing assignments, I mean, my students, for instance, they know that they need to keep everything they do during the semester. And that also includes class notes. And I'm saying class notes because, again, depending on age, it used to be, back in the days, you learn anything and you have to take notes in class. And that's actually was considered like a very important skill. And if you think about it, that's one of the most important skills when you learn a foreign language. It's about listening, comprehending, taking, think of the complexity of that. It's not something that should be taken for granted. Before the age of digital portfolios that I have right now, I used to tell this to students, but since that was not part of the assessment, I had no way to, quote unquote, enforce it. But given my current system for the last couple of years where I don't have tests and I don't have quizzes, so we have ongoing assignments and essays that the students correct and also these portfolios, so they know basically they get assessed for that, for how they learn, for how they make progress. So that is something that is very important. You can basically see from the very beginning how students learn, how they copy vocabulary from the board, how they create visual vocabulary sheets. That's basically that I ask them, okay, for this list of words, you should make drawings as opposed to writing the translation in English. And you can really learn a lot about the students and also about how they learn grammar, how they visualize things, how they conceptualize things. Another thing is, if we're talking about grammar, when you have that kind of scanning of everything a student did during the semester, talk about things like gender agreement or verb conjugation. If you look at the first version of an essay that a student writes, and you look at the first versions that the student wrote, the beginning of the semester, then end of the semester, then end of first year, you would see that even though you didn't take off any points for mistakes, that improves because, beginning maybe all of the gender agreement is wrong, and then end of the first semester, most of it is right, and then end of second year, rarely there are mistakes. So that's, again, going back to how you learn and how fast you can get from point A to point B. These digital portfolios, which are basically scanning of everything the student did, is a great way. As Yelena said, it doesn't add any work for the student because basically that's their ongoing work, only that they need to be more careful about not missing anything and actually keeping track of what they did, and maybe also have it a little bit organized so that the progress cannot be only made but also seen. Thank you.
So Yitna and I have been working together for 12 plus years, we think, in a pedagogy course that I teach in my department for the graduate students in Spanish and Italian. And occasionally we get graduate students, MA students from Meselk who are teaching Arabic as well. And so for a long time now, probably 10 or 12 years, Yitna and I have been using e-portfolios in our course to allow the graduate students to develop their own teaching portfolios. And for about 10 years or so, we were using a tool that Yitna designed himself called eFolio, which is a collaborative online writing tool. Yitna, do you want to say anything about that?
Well, you'll get to see it. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the goal of the teaching portfolio assignment, obviously, is to allow the graduate student teachers to start thinking about their teaching, to experiment with different teaching activities and ideas in their own teaching that their teaching courses at the same time, to reflect on what they're learning in the course and to reflect on their teaching in that semester, and to gather artifacts of their own teaching, whether it's lesson plans or activities, video clips, and other things. And so this is eFolio embedded in Collab. And this is where the graduate student teacher goes to submit assignments here called activities. And we also created in many years ago, when I got a Teaching and Technology Initiative Fellowship in 2005, Yitin and I worked together in developing a large archive of teaching clips of graduate students, instructors, and faculty members in my department teaching Spanish and Italian. And so we have this archive of clips here that the graduate student teacher can go in here and look at different clips of different teachers teaching at different levels. But this is the area also where you can go in, the student can go in and take a look at all of the assignments that have been posted by all of the students in the course. And so if you just go to postings here, all of the assignments have a comment box feature so that all of the students can go in there and read everyone else's work, essays, what have you. And at the very bottom, there's a comment board where the students can add comments or I can add comments. So it allows for ongoing dialogue and discussion on any one particular item. Yitin and I developed a series of different activities that involve video clips. So you just saw the video archive that we had developed many years ago. Some of the activities ask the students to go in there to view a very short video clip of best practices in teaching a particular topic, teaching grammar, teaching speaking, whatever, and to reflect, to watch it and then to reflect on it. Yitin, if you could go to activity 5, I think, in this list that you have currently open in the postings. No, activity 6, I think. So in one activity, we ask the graduate student teachers to self-videotape using a flip cam. And so this was another very exciting project that Yitin and I engaged in. We bought a whole bunch of flip cams and gave them out and asked the graduate students to self-videotape their own classroom teaching. We uploaded it and asked them to watch the whole clip and to select 2 or 3 small video clips that for them represented significant learning experiences or significant teaching experiences for them, or maybe not so significant, some problematic areas, and to reflect on them. And so if you just open Nora's there, something that Yitin devised in eFolio is the ability to embed video clips directly in the essay. And so Nora has here embedded a few different video clips of her own teaching. I don't think we need to see too much, but... And this allows her to reflect on it, and then going all the way down to the bottom in the comment feature, her partner, who at this time was Kristen, they paired up so that they could view and read each other's assignments throughout the semester. This allowed for some peer learning, some peer support, peer teaching, and so forth. So during the course of the semester, the students were involved in all of these different activities, collecting different artifacts, writing a statement of teaching philosophy, sharing, reading each other's, giving each other feedback on the different documents in order to improve and polish and revise. And then at the end of the semester, the graduate students selected those documents that for them represented significant learning during the course of the semester. Now, there were some core documents that were required, like the Statement of Teaching Philosophy, but then there were other documents that they could select and choose from to include in their final teaching portfolio. And so if we go to class portfolios, this is the spot where the teacher has uploaded. Why don't you open up over here too, Yitna, on the plus side? Yeah, Nora's is good. These are all of the different artifacts that Nora has chosen to include in her final portfolio as significant learning experiences that semester, together with a cover letter or a final reflective essay. And so this is what it looks like in eFolio, but then if you want to, yeah, the individual portfolio ends up looking like this. And this is Nora's final reflective essay here on the cover page, and on the side are her individual artifacts that she's chosen to include. And Yitna, do you want to say anything about how this is taken away by the student?
Oh, yeah. So this is also provided to the students as a zipped file so they can download it and load it up elsewhere or put it, on a CD so that they have some takeaway of the product. They're not restricted to using eFolio. I would also say that eFolio is something that, as Emily said, we've worked on it for years and years, and it's kind of helped us understand the issues around portfolio collecting. What kind of material can the students collect? How do you open it up to things like video? And so we've tested a lot of things. But the tool itself is an experimental tool. It's going away kind of slowly as we look at the commercial tools that do a lot of this stuff and even more that we're trying to shift towards. So this is something that we benefited from, and we kind of learned a lot about portfolios just through development of this tool, within the context of this course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so this, one of the goals is for this to become the beginning of the teaching portfolio for the graduate student teacher as she continues to teach here at UVA, go on the job market, have some preliminary items that could be included in their dossier once they go on the job market and such. So we used this tool, like I said, for 10 plus years, and then last year we decided to experiment with something new because we needed a new challenge in our lives. And so we decided to experiment with WordPress embedded in Collab. And so what you see here is the course WordPress site. This is the place where the students would go to get to the syllabus, to the course description, to updates, the schedule of assignments for the course, and instructions on how to use WordPress and Kultura. So each of our students in the course created her own WordPress teaching portfolio site. And just like you saw in the eFolio format, the same types of assignments occurred here last semester. So a collection of reflective essays, video clips, embedding video directly into reflective essays, a collection of lesson plans, and that sort of thing. So the same type of idea here, although we were interested in seeing how the graduate student teachers would develop their own kind of idea of the site and create their own creative product in the end. So if you want to go to maybe Jacob Shirley. And so it's the same basically the same types of assignments, the same types of learning goals for the course and such, but just a different format. And so here is Jacob's final teaching portfolio. This is his cover page or final reflective essay. At the top, or even here actually, he's described and embedded different the different items that he's decided to include in his final teaching portfolio. And then if you want to go to the top to assignments, maybe, and go to, I think it's activity 5, if you want to just scroll down.
Below
No,
it?
scroll down, yeah.
Whoops. My mouse is at it. This one.
I just want to show the video reflection again.
I don't know what, I'm having a hard time with this mouse.
So again, the same type of assignment where Jacob self-videotaped using a flip cam, uploaded the video into Kultura, and embedded the video clip directly into his video reflection.
This is not going to work because Kaltura has been upgraded, and I haven't gone back and made the changes necessary. It has to be world readable.
Yeah, we haven't done that yet. But you get to see the general idea, though.
One thing also that you'll notice here is that, let me see if I can go back to the original page, that this is really a site that contains all of the students' portfolios on the side. And that's something that we haven't touched on, but when Emily and I discussed this, and also eFolio, we talk about a course portfolio as well, not just for the individual students, but for the semester and the course, because that allows the course to evolve over time if it has all of the students' material in it, and it represents that experience. And so you as instructors can also basically produce a portfolio. In some cases, in my case, I think sometimes I do selective portfolios, the ones that I want to be representative of what happened that semester. I don't put everybody's material in there. But in order to do that, you have to have an initial setup where everybody has a shared space. And that's another dimension to the student experience. It's not just my portfolio, what I did, but what happened when we all gathered in this course, in this semester. There's something else that's grown out of that. And that's something that the students need to touch on and experience, not just individual experience.
Mm-hmm. And our next stage for next year is we're going to try out another tool called PebblePad. And so I'm just going to let Yitna and Gail and Tricia talk about that.
Yeah, that'll follow on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, you're good.
I'll start by just talking about the general context for incorporating portfolios in Collab and finding out sort of which tools we should use and so forth. So we're in a period now where we're looking at a lot of the commercial tools that are out there for electronic portfolios. PebblePad is one that has they've agreed to give us licenses for piloting it on a small scale, and there are others. One of the ways that we're going to pilot PebblePad is, as Emily mentioned, is in her course. That's for a single course, but we're also working with the School for Continuing and Professional Studies, SCPS, where the implementation is really at a larger scale. One aspect of portfolios that we also need to touch on, sort of outside of the teaching context, is that a good portfolio should address the needs of instructors, students, and administrators, and program people who want to collect the data. So we're looking for a tool that's really balanced in all of these areas. And that's the main criterion we're using to evaluate these tools. And so what SCPS is doing is one of those pilots in which administrators, instructors, and students are engaged. And Tricia will talk about how we integrate the tools in Collab once we decide which ones we're using, or even as we're piloting it, we really want to keep everything contained within Collab.
Okay, so from the school perspective, I work with Tricia and Yitna to think about what tools would be the best. So Yitna identified PebblePad, and I worked with one of the main programs we have is a Bachelor of Interdisciplinary Studies, and I work with the director there and some of the faculty there to do like a needs assessment. Yitna and I met with her to decide would they want to do this and why they might want to do it. And and Tricia's also involved because she needs, if it's going to be a tool that would be useful for everybody, it's really great to have Collab in on the ground floor to be able to ask questions and decide, is this a great tool for us to use or do we want to do that? So we had some meetings, and we've been doing this for the past few months, where we talked and to Yelena's point, how are we going to enhance the learning, not making sure we're not burdening people with what it is, and talking about thoughtfully about what an e-portfolio would be and why we would use it. And so what we've decided is there's 3 different levels of how we'll use it. And one would be for an advising level, because they have a new concentration in the program for social sciences. And so they're going to use it as an advising tool. So we have a few faculty there. We have about 15 to 20 faculty who are going to start doing this. Some faculty want to do it with individual students doing advising. The other thing is they want to redesign a course. So we have somebody who, we have different people who want to redesign their courses. And we also have people who are just engaging students in using the portfolios. And the other part was working with faculty, which is an administrative. That's really more high level, and there's only 1 person or 2 people who are doing that. But we have, so we're going to pilot, and right now we're at the phase where we're going to work with each individual faculty member, create the site, and a portfolio site, if you can see them, they're up there, the 3 different sites, and work to see what exactly intentionally they would like to do. And I like this framework, so I can even use some of that with them, because thinking about formal and informal and those types of things. So that's where we're going. Then we're going to do this with them, get feedback, and then create a report. And Yitna is going to pilot these tools elsewhere as well, probably here. So that's what I wanted to say, and it's been very widely received, very well received. I've had, if I talk about technology, people usually don't want to, but the portfolio and assessment, the people have just come. I mean, it's been a very wonderful response, and it's been very thoughtful conversation, and I've had face-to-face meetings and online meetings, and people are very engaged. So I mean, it makes sense, right? We want to talk about assessment with our students. So that's where we're at with that, and looking forward to that. And Tricia?
I guess the only thing I'll add is that, with a lot of these commercial tools today, there are ways to integrate them easily into Collab. And so Yitna and Gail have been coordinating the PebblePad integration with the Collab team. And so if there are other tools out there that you're interested in trying, the standard that we're looking for integration is called LTI, which stands for Learning Tools Interoperability, and long name. But that is a way to integrate external tools easily into Collab and give your students, so you can add the tool then to your Collab site, and it knows who your students are when they click on that tool in the menu. And you might want to just, So we've got one here already configured for PebblePad. And it is simply going to open up the PebblePad. It's really the external tool running here, right here in the interface. And it's all the features of that tool. Now Collab really isn't involved except for sending who's this kind of information to the tool. So it's just a way to give easy access to, in a familiar environment that you're already using, to tools like PebblePad and other portfolio tools.
Well, just to add to that is when Collab's involved in the conversation from the beginning, and if you're trying the tool, then you have more input on whether that tool would be used or not. So it's really good to have. Maybe you end up not liking the tool, or maybe you have a better tool. That would be great for us to know, because we're looking at other portfolio tools as well.
Right.
So we think portfolio, the PebblePad's great, but it's really good to have the experience of using it. So, and then you kind of gain the information whether you want to do that or not.
And just want to add that it's really not so much about the tool, the technology, as it is about the portfolios and what you want to use them for.
Right.
And that's probably why you're all here. It's not about the technology. But anyway, we're trying to make it easy.
Well,
Let me add one
Yeah.
thing. One thing that's happening at SCPS that's very interesting is that the conversation with the faculty and the administrators has evolved to the point of saying, how do we introduce this to the students? Like, in a very open way, so that they are aware that we're really considering a new approach. And so that's something that everybody here can be engaged in, is even if you're not using portfolios directly or you haven't really established the use of it, discussing it with the students, letting them know, because students can build portfolios on their own. They don't have to be within the context of a class. And I'm pretty sure that some students, the high achievers that we have here, are going to pick it up and start doing it. All they need is sort of a modicum of help somehow on how to use the tools. And so we can help generate the sort of thinking. Somebody at Stanford referred to it as folio thinking. It's a good term. Just sort of referring to it, what are our portfolios, and making a buzz out of that among the students would really help then when you start to use it. There'll be students who are familiar with it. It won't be as new to them. And SCPS is trying to do that. I think that's a good move.
And I do want to say one more thing about the possibility of any tool. It would be really nice to pick one. And so, that's another conversation. But I think at this stage, we're just trying some out to see what seems like a good fit for most of the people at UVA. And that's what PebblePad is, just we're trying it out. It's not a decided thing.
But any
Yeah.
involvement you have in it's going to help.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the sample, the concrete thing, visualize thing, and now you have things underway and going pretty well planned. So when the sample, well-tested sample, will be available for you to see, to view? The following fall semester?
Well, I mean, there are samples in different tools, and then there will be more after the summer. Fall will probably be the best time to sort of look at them in a
We are looking forward to
comparative basis.
Wonderful.
Hopefully.
And if you want to be part of it, let us know.
If you want to be part of this pilot
Yeah,
for the
let us know.
PebblePad,
You
yeah.
let us know.
There isn't. You can write to me, and I can add you to the collab site, and then you can sort of.
It gives you access to the tool, and you
We'll
can.
give you access to the tool.
Is it going to be campus-wide experiment, or you pick CBS as
PebblePad
the first guinea
is-
pig, half a guinea pig?
PebblePad is we have a limited number of guinea pig accounts, so we're sort of being careful with that, but it's large, 300 or 400. There are other experiments going on. Curry is beginning to look at another tool. The Curry School is looking at chalk and wire. And that may turn out to be an easy campus-wide license during the pilot, but they haven't decided yet. So this conversation is going on in many pockets at the university. But we'll definitely give demonstrations, and we can show you, we can add you to the site, and you can play with it.
And Emily, you are going to be the heavy guinea pig in the fall semester.
As a
At
course.
least we'll have one for
There'll be
the
one for,
representative.
definitely. Oh, gosh, yes.
Yeah, it wasn't, we opened it up to many schools, but I think our school gravitated towards it more quickly because it's the adult degree completion program, and I think people just saw, oh, this would, they gravitated.
Great opportunity.
But it's a good opportunity. Great. Any other questions?
Okay.
Okay.
To thank you all for coming and for staying. And do you have a sense that this hour and a half was well spent? No complaints? Good. Okay, thank you. I'd like to, thank Valerie. And yes, thank our hosts, the ASCIT and the IWL, the Institute of World Languages. And thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend. And that's it. Thank you.